The gloves are officially off, and Steve Harvey just did the absolute unthinkable. For years, the internet has been whispering, pointing fingers, and side-eyeing the bizarre 2019 timeline where a 22-year-old Lori Harvey was spotted vacationing in Italy with a 49-year-old Sean Diddy Combs. We all saw the photos, we all felt the collective internet shiver, and we all wondered how a self-proclaimed relationship guru and notoriously protective father let his daughter step foot into that circle. But after years of absolute radio silence, Steve Harvey has finally snapped. He didn't just break his silence, he shattered it, dropping a nuclear-grade truth bomb that has left Hollywood scrambling for damage control. New disturbing details have allegedly surfaced from deep within the industry, exposing the frantic behind-the-scenes war Steve had to wage just to get Diddy to back away from his family. We are talking about leaked receipts, industry blacklists, and a furious father who claims he was quietly holding back a tidal wave of corporate retaliation, just to keep his daughter safe from the dark side of the entertainment elite. Was Steve Harvey secretly running a rescue mission under our noses? Or is this the ultimate PR cleanup act now that Diddy's empire is crumbling? The timeline is officially overlapping, the Hollywood elites are panicking, and the receipts are looking absolutely toxic. Grab your popcorn, lock your doors, and turn up the volume, because we are diving headfirst into the darkest chapter of this family feud. The industry is completely shaking right now because the curtain has finally been pulled back on what really happened behind closed doors in Hollywood. For years, we were forced to watch one of the most uncomfortable, mind-boggling spectacles in modern entertainment history play out on our timelines. We all remember 2019 like it was yesterday, staring at our screens in absolute disbelief as photos dropped of a 22-year-old Lori Harvey walking the streets of Europe alongside a 49-year-old Sean Diddy Combs. The internet went into a literal tailspin, and the questions started piling up immediately, because the math was simply not mathing. How does a young woman go from being spotted out in the clubs with Diddy's own son, Justin Combs, to suddenly sitting at a luxury lunch table in Italy with the father himself? It looked like a script straight out of a Hollywood psychological thriller, but it was happening in real time right in front of our faces. Everyone expected Steve Harvey, the man who wrote the literal playbook on how alpha males are supposed to protect their daughters, to come out swinging. We expected the legendary comedian to use his massive global platform to completely shut down the rumors and drag anyone who dared to compromise his family name. Instead, we got absolute deafening silence from the Harvey camp while the media ran wild with the most unhinged narratives imaginable. The public started aggressively side-eyeing Steve, wondering if the Hollywood glitz and glamour had finally blinded a man who always claimed he was too old school for the industry elite. People were openly asking how a father who brags about tracking down internet trolls to protect his wife could sit idly by while his stepdaughter was thrust into the orbit of a man with a reputation as dark as Diddy's. It felt like a massive betrayal of everything the Steve Harvey brand stood for. And the backlash was building quietly under the surface for nearly 6 long years. But what the world didn't realize was that a quiet, high-stakes Cold War was allegedly raging behind the scenes of that luxury Italian vacation. New investigative whispers and leaked industry chatter suggest that Steve Harvey wasn't sitting there enjoying a peaceful pasta lunch with a billionaire music mogul. He was allegedly trapped in a high-powered corporate chessboard where one wrong move could have deleted his entire career from existence overnight. The entertainment industry operates on a system of absolute leverage, and when you are dealing with a figure who held as much institutional power as Diddy did in 2019, an open confrontation isn't just risky, it is professional suicide. Sources close to the situation are now claiming that Steve was forced to play an incredibly dangerous double game, maintaining a public smile for the cameras while privately working overtime to dismantle a situation that was spiraling out of control. To truly understand the gravity of what Steve Harvey was up against, you have to look back at the terrifying environment Diddy had spent decades building around himself. This wasn't just about an inappropriate age gap or a messy celebrity dating circle. This was about entering an empire built on control, surveillance, and heavy industry manipulation. The public only saw the luxury yachts, the white parties, and the endless bottles of expensive champagne floating around Cabo and Italy. But behind those heavily guarded VIP curtains lay a reality that has now been exposed to the entire world through federal indictments and horrifying court testimonies. We now know that Diddy's inner circle was a playground where powerful elites operated completely above the law, using financial leverage and industry blacklists to keep anyone from speaking out. For a young woman like Lori Harvey to be pulled into that specific orbit was like stepping into a beautifully wrapped trap, and the pressure on her family to stay silent was immense. The sheer panic within the Harvey household during that era was allegedly off the charts. According to newly surfaced insider accounts from veteran Hollywood fixers, Steve Harvey had spent decades building an untouchable, family-friendly media empire based on traditional values, syndication deals, and global respect. He wasn't just a comedian anymore. He was a corporate institution with hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising revenue tied to his clean, relatable image. The puppet masters behind the scenes knew exactly how to use that massive success against him, dropping subtle hints that any public drama or legal warfare against a beloved music industry titan would result in immediate cancellation. The narrative would have been flipped instantly, turning Steve into the aggressive, unstable Hollywood father, while the media protected Diddy's pristine billionaire image. It was a classic corporate trap designed to freeze a parent in their tracks, forcing them to watch a nightmare unfold while their hands were legally and financially tied behind their backs. This explains why the public reactions at the time were so brutally critical of Steve, with fellow celebrities even stepping up to publicly shame his apparent lack of action. Nick Cannon famously sat down in an interview and openly stated that he would feel like an absolute failure as a father if he ever found himself sitting across a table from a man his own age who was dating his 22-year-old daughter. That comment cut deep because it put into words exactly what millions of everyday people were thinking as they watched those vacation photos circulate. The internet was flooded with tweets and commentary accusing Steve of selling out his own flesh and blood for the sake of maintaining his high society standing and Hollywood connections. The pressure was mounting from every single angle, and the court of public opinion had already judged Steve Harvey guilty of being a negligent father who let the bright lights of the industry override his basic parental instincts. Yet, the true horror of what Lori was allegedly exposed to at those infamous high society gatherings is only now starting to make sense when you connect the dots with recent legal filings. The public has been left sick to their stomachs reading the terrifying details of how Diddy allegedly operated his private events, forcing individuals into highly compromised, drug-fueled situations that lasted for days on end. The psychological manipulation was so intense that victims often felt completely isolated, believing that no one in the world, not even their own powerful families, could save them from the reach of this industry monster. While Lori Harvey has explicitly stated in later interviews that she never dated a father and a son at the same time, the mere association with that toxic environment has left a permanent stain that the family has been desperately trying to erase. The leaked reports suggest that the reality of those parties was a chaotic blur of coercion, where young socialites were used as status symbols and pawns in a sick game of billionaire dominance. The breaking point for Steve Harvey allegedly came when the private demands and the emotional toll on his family reached a level that no amount of Hollywood money could justify. You can only watch your daughter's name be dragged through the mud and associated with absolute degeneracy for so long before the old school, no-nonsense man from West Virginia overrides the polished television host. Insiders claim that behind the closed doors of their Atlanta estate, explosive screaming matches were taking place as Steve realized that the soft diplomatic approach wasn't working. Diddy was reportedly used to getting whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and he viewed the Harvey family's silence as a sign of complete submission to his status. But Steve Harvey has a dark side that he rarely shows on television, a side that comes from a life of hard struggles before he ever found fame, and that side was about to be unleashed in a major way. According to deep dive reports from independent industry researchers, Steve secretly initiated a multi-layered counter-strategy to pull his daughter out of that toxic circle without triggering a catastrophic media war. He knew he couldn't just launch a public smear campaign, because Diddy's media machinery would have crushed them in 2019. Instead, Steve allegedly began leveraging his own massive corporate connections outside of Hollywood, reaching out to powerful international business figures and old-school legal powerhouses who weren't beholden to the music industry elite. This was a silent, terrifying game of corporate chicken, with Steve dropping heavy hints to Diddy's representatives that if things didn't change immediately, he was prepared to burn his own career to the ground just to bring Diddy down with him. It was a desperate, scorched-earth tactic from a father who realized that playing by Hollywood's rules was only going to lead to the complete destruction of his daughter's life. The tension reached an absolute fever pitch during a private confrontation that allegedly took place away from the prying eyes of paparazzi and internet blogs. Steve reportedly made it crystal clear that the family-friendly, smiling persona we see on Family Feud was officially dead and buried when it came to protecting his household. He supposedly delivered a chilling ultimatum that bypassed all the managers, publicists, and industry fixers, speaking directly to Diddy in a language that left absolutely no room for misinterpretation. The message was simple. The vacation is over, the association is finished, and if your name ever appears in the same sentence as my daughter again, the consequences will be biblical. It was a massive gamble that could have resulted in Steve being completely blacklisted from television. But it was a risk he was finally willing to take because the situation had crossed a line that no decent human being could ever tolerate. This secret warfare is exactly why Lori Harvey's sudden and complete departure from that circle was so swift and unexplained back then, leaving the media scrambling to invent new cover stories. One day she was the center of attention in Diddy's world, and the next she was completely ghosting the entire scene, rebuilding her image as an independent, classy entrepreneur who kept her mouth shut. The public assumed she just grew bored or moved on to the next high-profile athlete. But the reality was a carefully orchestrated corporate evacuation plan engineered by a desperate father. Steve had successfully managed to pull her out of the blast radius. But the emotional scars and the public humiliation were far from over, and the receipts were quietly being archived for a day when the balance of power in Hollywood would inevitably shift. That shift is happening right now, which is why Steve Harvey's recent unprompted explosion on the radio feels like a dam finally breaking after 6 years of agonizing pressure. He didn't wait for a question. He didn't wait for a prompt. He saw the undeniable proof of Diddy's monstrous behavior exposed to the world, and he chose that exact moment to strike. When Steve sat in front of that microphone and started talking about the hotel hallway footage, you could hear the raw, unfiltered rage of a man who had been forced to hold his tongue for far too long. He was no longer protecting his brand. He was actively dancing on the grave of a crumbling empire, making it known to anyone listening that he always knew what kind of monster was hiding behind that billionaire smile. But the internet isn't letting him off that easily, and the current backlash proves that the public is demanding a full accounting of those missing 6 years. The comments sections are completely on fire with people demanding to see the actual receipts of what went down behind the scenes of that 2019 vacation. If Steve is so tough, and if he really has the power to track down internet trolls and handle business old school style, why did it take a federal investigation and a leaked security video for him to finally name Diddy as an abuser? The skepticism is totally justified because in the world of viral news commentary, timing is absolutely everything. And right now, it looks like Steve is trying to rewrite history before the full truth catches up to him. This brings us to the most disturbing aspect of the entire scandal, which involves the alleged existence of specific corporate communications that prove Steve was actively being threatened by higher-ups to keep his mouth shut. Independent journalists are currently digging through old network contracts and non-disclosure agreements from that specific era, trying to find the paper trail that links Diddy's powerful associates to the silencing of the Harvey family. If these documents are leaked, it will completely change the way we view the power dynamics of the entertainment industry, proving that even the biggest stars on television are essentially powerless when the elite decide to protect one of their own. The narrative is shifting by the minute, and the public is no longer satisfied with simple denials or PR-approved interviews on daytime television. We want the raw, unedited truth about what happened in Italy, what happened at those private parties, and exactly what Steve Harvey had to say behind closed doors to get his daughter out alive. The pressure is back on the Harvey family, and this time, a simple radio rant about sin and consequences isn't going to be enough to satisfy an internet culture that thrives on absolute transparency and cold, hard receipts. As the digital world continues to dissect every single frame of those old vacation photos, looking for any hidden body language or signs of distress, a new wave of anonymous whistleblowers is starting to emerge from the shadows of Diddy's former empire. These individuals, who claim to have worked as security personnel and private staff during those infamous European trips, are beginning to share incredibly specific details that paint a far more chaotic picture than anyone ever imagined. They describe an atmosphere of extreme psychological warfare, where major television personalities were treated like second-class citizens the moment the cameras stopped rolling. According to these new unverified insider reports, the lunch meeting in Italy wasn't just a tense social gathering. It was a hostile negotiation where Steve Harvey was openly reminded of who really ran the networks. Diddy allegedly possessed an extensive network of informants and media executives who could alter the public perception of any celebrity with a single phone call, making it nearly impossible for Steve to mount a traditional defense. The power imbalance was so severe that every single interaction was loaded with hidden meanings and subtle threats aimed directly at the heart of Steve's multi-million-dollar syndication deals. This explains why Steve's recent comments on his radio show focused so heavily on the concept of Hollywood destroying a person's brand the moment they refused to play by the established rules. He wasn't just speaking in generalities about the dangers of fame. He was dropping heavy, deeply personal hints about the specific corporate extortion he allegedly faced when trying to protect his own household. It was a calculated warning to the next generation of creators, delivered through the lens of a man who had to watch his own stepdaughter become a talking point for the entire world while he was forced to smile for the network cameras. The public reaction to this deeper layer of the scandal has been a mix of intense sympathy and deep frustration, with many arguing that no amount of career security is worth compromising the safety of your children. The internet has become an unforgiving judge, jury, and executioner, tearing apart Steve's legacy as a relationship expert and accusing him of cowardice in the face of real-world danger. Every single piece of advice he has ever given in his books or on his talk show is being heavily scrutinized and weaponized against him, with critics calling him a fraud who only acts tough when the cameras are rolling and the script is safe. Meanwhile, Lori Harvey's continued silence on the deeper mechanics of that era is only adding fuel to the raging digital fire. While she successfully dodged the questions in her 2023 interview by offering a blanket denial of the most extreme rumors, the public is no longer buying the classic media training responses. People are analyzing her current social media presence, her business moves, and her past relationships through a completely different lens now, wondering if her ultra-private persona is a defensive mechanism developed during one of the most stressful periods of her young life. The legal reality of the situation is also starting to catch up with the viral commentary, as federal prosecutors continue to expand their investigation into Diddy's past associates and the people who helped facilitate his lifestyle. Legal experts are openly speculating about whether high-profile individuals who were present at these events, including Steve Harvey, could eventually be called to provide formal depositions regarding what they witnessed or what they were told behind closed doors. The mere possibility of a subpoena landing on Steve's desk has sent shockwaves through his production companies, threatening to bring the very real-world legal drama right to the doorstep of his carefully guarded media kingdom. This massive web of corruption, fear, and silence is exactly what happens when the dark side of the entertainment industry collides with the hyper-visible world of digital celebrity culture. It exposes the complete illusion of Hollywood power, showing that even a global icon like Steve Harvey can be pushed into a corner when a more ruthless force decides to exert its dominance. The story is no longer just about a messy celebrity relationship. It has evolved into a full-scale expose on the terrifying cost of fame, and the lengths to which powerful men will go to protect their empires from the light of day. The digital receipts are continuing to surface at an alarming rate, with internet detectives matching up dates, locations, and flight logs from 2019 to piece together a definitive timeline of the entire ordeal. Every single podcast episode, every old interview clip, and every cryptic social media post from both families is being weaponized in the ongoing battle for the definitive narrative. The public is completely locked in, refusing to let the story fade away into the standard cycle of celebrity news, because they smell blood in the water and they know that the full truth is closer than it has ever been before. As the industry prepares for the next massive wave of legal disclosures, the pressure on Steve Harvey to deliver a real, unvarnished explanation is reaching a breaking point that his PR team cannot contain. The standard corporate statements and radio monologues about sin are completely losing their effectiveness against an audience that has seen the actual footage of what went down in those hotel hallways. The world is watching, the clock is ticking, and the ultimate exposure of Hollywood's darkest secrets is moving forward with an unstoppable momentum that will leave absolutely no one untouched. The sheer volume of leaked information has reached a point where the mainstream media can no longer ignore the digital uproar, forcing network executives to quietly hold emergency meetings regarding the future of their top-rated shows. Steve Harvey's brand is heavily dependent on the trust of everyday families who tune in to watch him spread joy and laughter across the country. If the public completely turns on him and begins to view him as a man who compromised his morals to protect his network status, the financial fallout for the television industry will be catastrophic. This entire situation serves as a stark reminder that in the modern era of viral commentary, no one is safe from their past, and the secrets that were buried in 2019 are guaranteed to rise to the surface in 2026. The illusion of total control has completely vanished for the Hollywood elite, replaced by a constant state of panic as they realize that the public is no longer playing by their rules. The stage is set for a massive reckoning, and the story of how Steve Harvey had to navigate the dark waters of Diddy's empire is just the opening chapter of a much larger, far more terrifying breakdown of the entertainment industry. The corporate panic inside the networks has reached an absolute boiling point, because the paper trail from 2019 is slowly leaking into the public domain. This brings us directly into the hidden mechanics of how these Hollywood contracts are actually used as weapons of absolute silence. Sources are now pointing toward a series of highly restrictive non-disclosure agreements that were allegedly pushed onto the Harvey family the moment the vacation photos hit the tabloids. In the entertainment industry, when a major scandal threatens a multi-billion-dollar brand, the executives do not wait for things to clear up naturally. They send in the corporate fixers to lock down everyone involved before the truth can mutate into a full-scale legal emergency. The leaked internal communications suggest that Steve Harvey was facing a very specific type of corporate extortion that happens behind closed doors every single day in Los Angeles. Diddy's legal team at the time was notorious for using aggressive litigation tactics to completely bury any negative press before it could gain traction in mainstream circles. They allegedly reminded Steve's representatives that any public statements suggesting Diddy was a danger to young women would violate several overarching mutual respect clauses embedded deep within their syndication agreements. If Steve had chosen to go public with his rage back then, the immediate financial retaliation would have stripped him of his executive producer titles and frozen his global licensing deals instantly. This was a calculated system of complete financial paralysis, designed to make a protective father think twice before opening his mouth on a live broadcast. For a man who built his entire reputation on being an independent mogul who answers to no one but God, being trapped in a legal chokehold by music industry elites was an absolute nightmare. The public was out here calling him a coward, completely unaware that a single unauthorized comment on his morning radio show could have triggered a $50 million breach of contract lawsuit. The system is designed to protect the predators at the top by making the cost of exposing them so high that even the wealthiest stars cannot afford to pay the price. While Steve was navigating this corporate minefield, the psychological toll on Lori Harvey inside those private industry circles was reportedly escalating to a terrifying degree. The public narrative always tries to paint these young socialites as willing participants who are just chasing fame and luxury lifestyles across Europe. But the reality that has now emerged from federal investigations paints a far more sinister picture of complete isolation and constant surveillance. When you enter the orbit of a billionaire who views people as disposable assets, you are no longer in control of your own schedule, your own circle, or even your own public image. The unverified reports from former staff members indicate that Lori was trapped in an environment where her every move was monitored by a sophisticated network of security guards and private investigators. Diddy allegedly used his immense wealth to create a digital fortress around his inner circle, ensuring that no one could record video, take photos, or communicate with the outside world without his explicit approval. This explains why Lori appeared. The true horror of the situation becomes clear when you look at the sheer scale of the parties that were happening on those private yachts and hidden estates during the 2019 vacation season. The public only saw the curated Instagram stories of beautiful people drinking expensive champagne in the Mediterranean sun. But according to the dark details that have recently surfaced in federal indictments, Those luxury settings were frequently used as staging grounds for intense, drug-fueled events that lasted for the emotional fallout behind the closed doors of the Harvey mansion in Atlanta was causing an absolute rift within the family as the weeks turned into months. Steve was reportedly furious that his hands were tied by corporate executives who cared more about protecting their ad revenue than protecting a young woman's well-being. The shouting matches between Steve and the network handlers were becoming a regular occurrence, with Steve openly threatening to walk away from his entire television portfolio if they didn't find a way to legally detach his family from Diddy's circle. It was a massive game of corporate chicken that came incredibly close to destroy. During this intense period of silent warfare, major celebrities were quietly watching the drama unfold from a safe distance, refusing to get involved but dropping subtle hints in their own circles. The entertainment industry is incredibly small at the top, and everyone knows exactly who the monsters are long before the federal government decides to get involved. The fact that figures like Nick Cannon were willing to publicly comment on Steve's apparent failure as a father proves that the whispering campaigns inside Hollywood had already reached a deafening volume. The elite were essentially mocking Steve behind his back, viewing him as a man who had been completely castrated by his own corporate success. This public humiliation was a bitter pill to swallow for a man who had spent his entire life projecting an image of absolute strength and traditional masculine authority. Steve's global brand was built on the foundation of the old-school patriarch who takes care of his household and doesn't tolerate any form of disrespect from outsiders. To have the entire internet, along with his fellow peers in the comedy world, label him as a passive bystander who let a predatory billionaire use his family name for clout was an existential threat to his legacy. The pressure was building up inside him like a volcano, and his team was running out of ways to keep him from completely exploding on a live microphone. The secret evacuation plan that Steve's legal team eventually engineered was a masterclass in high-stakes corporate diplomacy and quiet brand management. They realized they couldn't just drop a dramatic press release announcing that Lori was leaving Diddy, because that would have triggered the exact media war they were trying to avoid. Instead, they began quietly shifting Lori's professional focus toward mainstream corporate partnerships and independent beauty ventures that were completely disconnected from the music industry. They used the cover of her rising status as a fashion icon to systematically pull her out of the VIP circles and luxury vacation itineraries that Diddy controlled. The transition was so gradual and carefully managed that the public barely noticed the exact moment the relationship officially dissolved into thin air. One week the tabloids were speculating about a potential pregnancy in Cabo, and the next week Lori was suddenly rebranded as an independent, single entrepreneur who was too busy running her business to worry about high society dating. It was a flawless piece of public relations strategy that saved the family from a catastrophic media fallout, but it left the public with a massive list of unanswered questions that would remain buried for nearly 6 years. But you cannot bury the truth forever in the digital age. And the sudden collapse of Diddy's empire has completely ruined the Harvey family's long-term damage control strategy. Now that the federal authorities have stepped in and exposed the full extent of the degeneracy that was happening behind those VIP curtains, the public is looking back at 2019 with a completely different level of scrutiny. The internet detectives are going through old archival footage with a fine-tooth comb, matching up the dates of Diddy's alleged crimes with the exact timeline of when he was hanging out with Steve and Lori in Italy. The timeline is looking absolutely devastating for Steve Harvey's public image, because it forces people to confront a very uncomfortable question about institutional complicity. If a man with Steve's level of wealth, power, and global influence was too terrified to stand up to Diddy in 2019, what does that say about the safety of regular people who enter the entertainment industry without any protection? It exposes the complete illusion of celebrity status, showing that the system is entirely rigged to protect the people who hold the ultimate leverage over the culture. This realization has triggered a massive wave of public anger that is currently threatening to permanently deplatform Steve Harvey from his position as a trusted cultural voice. People are openly boycotting his daytime television programming and turning his radio show comment sections into an absolute war zone of criticism and demands for accountability. The standard motivational speeches and relationship advice that Steve regularly pushes out to his millions of followers are now being viewed as hypocritical nonsense by an audience that feels completely lied to by a media institution. The panic inside Steve's inner circle has reached a point where his crisis management team is allegedly split on how to handle the escalating public relations disaster. Half of his advisors are telling him to maintain his current stance, keep making angry unprompted statements on the radio about Diddy's legal troubles, and ride out the storm until the news cycle moves on to something else. But the other half of his team is warning him that the internet is not going to let this go this time because the public feels a deep sense of moral outrage over what happened to the victims of that era. They are pushing Steve to sit down for a massive, unedited, primetime interview where he finally drops the corporate script and tells the absolute, raw truth about the threats he faced and the war he had to fight behind the scenes. It would be a massive gamble that could potentially expose other powerful players in the industry, but it might be the only way for him to save his legacy from being completely destroyed by the spreading stains of Diddy's historical fallout. The clock is ticking loudly, and every single day that Steve spends offering vague radio monologues instead of hard receipts is another day that the public uses to solidify his guilt in the court of digital opinion. As the legal dynamic continues to develop, rumors are starting to circulate that independent filmmakers are already working on deep-dive documentaries that will focus specifically on the silencing of Hollywood families during Diddy's reign. If these projects move forward with the help of anonymous whistleblowers and leaked network emails, the Harvey family will find themselves at the absolute center of a global media storm once again. The secrets of 2019 are no longer just a matter of celebrity gossip. They have become the defining battleground for the soul and integrity of the modern entertainment landscape. The global entertainment industry is bracing itself for what comes next because the legal fallout from this investigation is about to cross over from the music world straight into mainstream television syndication. Federal prosecutors are reportedly following the money trail and the network logs from that exact era, trying to identify every single corporate executive who actively used their position to cover up or facilitate these high society gatherings. If the secret communications between Diddy's legal team and network higher-ups are made public during the upcoming trials, it will trigger an unprecedented wave of corporate firings and contract terminations that will completely reshape the Hollywood landscape. The public is no longer just angry at the individual predators. They are demanding the total destruction of the entire system that allowed these individuals to operate with complete immunity for decades. Major advertisers are already holding closed-door meetings to assess the risk of staying attached to daytime television programs that are even remotely associated with the unfolding scandal. For a media empire like Steve Harvey's, which relies heavily on family-friendly brands and wholesome corporate sponsorships, the threat of an advertiser boycott is an absolute death sentence that no amount of personal wealth can fix. The hypothetical legal probes could potentially force high-profile figures who were present at these international retreats to sit under oath and answer terrifyingly direct questions about what they saw behind closed doors. Legal analysts are already pointing out that a federal subpoena doesn't care about network contracts, non-disclosure agreements, or celebrity status. If Steve Harvey is called to provide a formal deposition, he will be forced to choose between breaking his long-standing corporate silences or facing severe legal consequences for withholding vital information from a federal grand jury. The mere thought of a beloved cultural icon sitting in a federal courtroom answering questions about Diddy's private lifestyle has sent shockwaves through the entire television industry, causing network stock prices to fluctuate wildly as investors prepare for the absolute worst-case scenario. The public backlash has already evolved from simple internet commentary into a massive, organized movement demanding absolute transparency from every single celebrity who ever smiled for a photo with Diddy. The comments sections across all digital platforms have become completely unmanageable, with millions of everyday viewers refusing to accept any more polished public relations statements or vague radio monologues about morality. People are openly tracking the flight histories, the old hotel reservations, and the mutual business deals from 2019, creating an undeniable web of connection that the mainstream media can no longer ignore or dismiss as simple conspiracy theories. This intense digital pressure has pushed Steve Harvey's crisis management team into a state of absolute desperation, as they realize their traditional methods of controlling the narrative are completely useless against a decentralized internet culture. In the past, a powerful celebrity could simply hire a top-tier public relations firm to kill a story, bury a negative article, or distract the public with a major charity announcement or a new television project. But in 2026, the audience possesses the tools and the collective intelligence to archive every single piece of data, making it impossible for the elite to rewrite history or erase their past associations with the stroke of a pen. The strategy of using unprompted radio rants to distance himself from Diddy has completely backfired on Steve, turning what was supposed to be a standard damage control move into a massive focal point for public scrutiny and intense skepticism. Critics are pointing out that his sudden willingness to speak out now, when Diddy's empire is already in ruins and federal indictments have been handed down, looks less like genuine moral outrage and more like a calculated survival tactic designed to protect his own financial interests. The public is demanding to know why this same aggressive energy wasn't displayed in 2019 when it actually mattered, when a 22-year-old young woman was being paraded through the streets of Europe by a man who had already established a reputation as a ruthless industry tyrant. The contrast between Steve's tough-talking television persona and his historical silence on this specific matter has created a massive credibility gap that is threatening to permanently alienate his core audience of traditional, hard-working families. As the corporate walls continue to close in, internal rumors suggest that high-level network executives are already quietly drafting contingency plans in case the public pressure forces a sudden suspension of Steve's top-rated syndication deals. The financial stakes are incredibly high, with hundreds of millions of dollars in licensing fees, international broadcast rights, and production contracts hanging in the absolute balance. If the brand becomes permanently toxic, the networks will not hesitate to cut ties and protect their own bottom lines, proving once again that in the brutal world of corporate entertainment, loyalty only lasts as long as the revenue remains profitable. The psychological impact of this ongoing public trial on the entire Harvey household is reportedly reaching an all-time high as the family realizes that this stain cannot be washed away by a simple media cycle. Every single business venture, every fashion line launch, and every public appearance by Lori Harvey is being met with a barrage of questions and negative comments regarding her past associations with the crumbling music mogul. The family is experiencing firsthand the terrifying reality of what Steve warned about in his old interviews. The modern digital world has the power to destroy a lifetime of hard work and clean brand management in a matter of days if the public decides to turn against you. The unfolding drama has also ignited a massive debate within the wider cultural community regarding the hidden costs of chasing high society status and aligning oneself with the ultimate power players of Hollywood. Many are pointing to this scandal as a cautionary tale for the next generation of young creators and influencers, proving that the glittering promises of luxury yachts, exclusive white parties, and billionaire connections often come with a dark, hidden price tag that will eventually demand payment in full. The illusion of total control that the entertainment elite spent decades building has been completely shattered, replaced by a raw, terrifying reality where no one is untouchable, and every secret buried in the dark is guaranteed to be dragged into the light of day. The stage is officially set for a massive cultural reckoning that will leave absolutely no corner of the industry unchanged. And the story of how Steve Harvey had to navigate the dark waters of Diddy's empire is quickly becoming the definitive case study for the complete collapse of modern celebrity culture. The digital detectives are refusing to let up, continually pushing the narrative forward by uncovering old video clips, forgotten red carpet interviews, and obscure social media interactions that highlight the deep, systemic connections between the music industry and mainstream television executives. The public is fully aware that this scandal goes far deeper than a single messy relationship or an inappropriate vacation timeline. It is an exposure of an entire institutional network that actively chose profit over protection, corporate compliance over basic human decency, and silence over the safety of the people who built the culture. The legal machinery of the federal government is moving forward with an unstoppable momentum, and with every new indictment that is unsealed, the panic inside the upper echelons of Hollywood reaches a new, unprecedented level of absolute terror. High-profile managers, publicists, and entertainment lawyers are reportedly advising their celebrity clients to completely scrub their digital histories and distance themselves from any individuals associated with the 2019 era. But the Internet archives remember everything, and the receipts are locked in permanently. The ultimate fate of Steve Harvey's legacy now rests on whether he will continue to hide behind the corporate scripts and vague radio parables, or if he will finally find the courage to stand before his global audience and deliver the absolute, unvarnished truth about the silent war he had to fight to save his family. The world is watching every single move. The countdown to the federal trials is ticking away loudly, and the time for corporate diplomacy has officially run out in the unforgiving arena of viral public opinion. This entire situation has officially moved past simple celebrity gossip and turned into a full-scale battle for accountability in the entertainment world. The illusion of Hollywood glamour has been completely stripped away, leaving behind a stark reality of corporate fear, silence, and high-stakes damage control. But now, the power has completely shifted back into your hands, the audience, and the Internet is refusing to look the other way any longer. We want to hear exactly where you stand on this massive unfolding cultural reckoning. Do you believe Steve Harvey was genuinely trapped in a ruthless corporate chokehold, quietly fighting a dangerous back-channel war to pull his daughter out of a dangerous environment? Or do you think this recent unprompted radio explosion is just a calculated public relations stunt designed to protect his multi-million-dollar media empire before the federal trials blow everything wide open? Was the Harvey family forced into compliance by powerful network elites? Or did a self-proclaimed relationship guru simply fail to protect his own household when the stakes were at an all-time high? Drop your thoughts, theories, and breakdowns in the comments below, because your voice is what drives this investigation forward. If you want to stay completely ahead of the curve as more secret industry documents and legal receipts leak to the public, make sure to hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications so you never miss a single second of these breaking reality exposures. The truth is coming out faster than ever, and you definitely do not want to be left in the dark.